Blue and red lights slashed across the white marble walls of the Al-Rashid Palace, their reflection flickering over shattered champagne flutes and pools of crimson spreading across the polished floor. Moments earlier, the palace had pulsed with music, Arabic drums blending with a live jazz quartet flown in from New Orleans. Now, silence, broken only by the crackle of police radios and the sobs of a trembling bridesmaid, hung heavy over the scene. Just hours before, the Texas widow had stepped out of a diamond-encrusted Rolls-Royce in a gown worth more than most people's homes. Her smile was flawless for the cameras as she clasped the hand of the 60-year-old Dubai Sheikh beside her. The world had called it a fairy tale union, an American heartbroken by loss and a Middle Eastern tycoon who promised her the world. Yet beneath the glittering chandeliers, jealousies simmered, secrets lurked, and the price of $8 million in promised fortune would be paid in blood. As paramedics pushed past dazed guests in couture gowns, whispers rippled through the crowd. Was it a robbery? A jealous lover? A betrayal from within the family itself? Security footage would soon reveal a masked figure slipping through a side entrance, someone who knew the palace layout too well to be an outsider. Far across the city, reporters scrambled to draft headlines, unaware that what had unfolded inside those golden gates would spark an international scandal, unearthing decades of hidden affairs, secret deals, and dangerous promises. The story of the Texas widow and the Dubai Sheikh was about to captivate the world, not for the glamour of their wedding, but for the carnage that followed. If stories like this pull you in, the kind where luxury and loyalty collide with greed and betrayal, subscribe now so you don't miss the twists that even seasoned investigators couldn't predict. What happened that night wasn't just a crime. It was a revelation that the most dazzling fairy tales can hide the darkest nightmares. Under the searing Texas sun, Abigail Abby Cole had once been the picture of small-town devotion. A high school English teacher, a rancher's wife, and the dependable daughter who never missed Sunday service. She'd grown up in a weathered farmhouse on the outskirts of Lubbock, where the wind whipped across endless fields of cotton and her father's old guitar echoed through warm summer nights. Abby's life had been simple until fate delivered two shocks, one of devastating loss and another of irresistible temptation. Her husband, Marcus Cole, a quiet cattle rancher with calloused hands and a shy smile, had been her high school sweetheart. For 20 years, they shared dusty pickup truck rides, porch swing evenings, and whispered dreams of adopting a child when the ranch finally turned profitable. But a freak accident, a rolled tractor on an icy winter road, left Abby widowed at 38. The funeral was modest, but the ache that lingered afterward was anything but. She learned that grief is a shapeshifter, sometimes heavy and suffocating, sometimes a silent shadow that followed her even into crowded rooms. For months, she went through the motions, grading essays, balancing Marcus's lingering ranch debts, and forcing smiles at potluck dinners. Friends suggested grief counseling. Her sister mailed her a self-help book on moving forward. Abby, restless and lonely, began spending evenings scrolling through travel forums and expat message boards. The images on her screen, turquoise waters, diamond-drenched soirees, elegant men in bespoke suits, were a world away from her weather-beaten farmhouse. One night in a late-night forum chat about luxury travel, a private message pinged her screen. The sender's profile picture showed a dignified man in a tailored thobe standing in front of a gleaming white yacht. His name, Sheikh Omar Al-Rashid. His words were polished and warm. "You have a poet's heart. Have you ever seen the Persian Gulf at sunrise?" At first, Abby ignored him, but Omar was persistent, never crude or pushy, just attentive. He asked about her late husband, her dreams, the ranch she could barely afford to keep. He sent photos of sweeping desert dunes and glittering city skylines. When he offered to fly her to New York to attend a charity gala where he was a guest speaker, she hesitated only a moment before saying yes. The trip was a revelation. Omar arrived in a chauffeur-driven Rolls, guiding her into a world of champagne fountains and velvet-troped VIP lounges. He introduced her to ambassadors and fashion designers as if she already belonged. For the first time since Marcus's death, Abby felt alive, desired, even revered. Back home in Texas, her best friend Jenna noticed the change. Designer handbags replacing canvas totes, foreign perfumes replacing her usual lavender spritz. Jenna warned, "Abby, men like that don't marry girls like us. Be careful." But Abby's loneliness and the thrill of Omar's attention drowned out every warning. Over the next months, Omar visited Texas twice, renting entire floors of boutique hotels. He rode horses with Abby on Marcus's old ranch and charmed the church ladies with generous donations to the local food bank. The whispers in town grew louder. Some called her lucky, others called her reckless. By the time Omar proposed, beneath a canopy of fairy lights at a Paris fashion gala, Abby had convinced herself it was destiny. A widowed teacher from a forgotten Texas county was about to become a Sheikh's bride, with an $8 million dowry whispered about in society pages. She brushed aside concerns about signing a prenuptial agreement she barely understood. She ignored the slight edge in Omar's voice when he spoke about an ex-mistress who wouldn't let go. She silenced the gnawing unease in her gut when she caught him whispering urgently into his phone late one night. All she could see was the promise of rebirth. New dresses, new countries, new purpose. But buried beneath the sparkle of diamonds and desert sunsets were the first cracks in a fairy tale destined to collapse. If you're drawn to real life, style stories where glamour hides dangerous secrets, subscribe now so you don't miss the next turn in Abby's unbelievable journey. The world saw her as a lucky widow chasing love, but destiny had a darker plan waiting just beyond the palace gates. To the outside world, Sheikh Omar al-Rashid was the embodiment of modern royalty, a 60-year-old oil magnate who had transformed desert sands into an empire of gleaming towers and five-star resorts. Magazines called him a visionary philanthropist. Society photographers loved his polished public image, tailored thobes in Dubai, tuxedos in Manhattan, and charming smiles beside heads of state. But those who had known him longest whispered about another Omar, a man who collected secrets as easily as he collected rare Bentleys. Born into one of Dubai's oldest merchant families, Omar inherited both staggering wealth and a legacy of power. His father, a respected businessman and devout patriarch, had taught him the importance of appearances. From a young age, Omar learned that a sheikh's word was his currency, and that reputation, once tarnished, could destroy dynasties. By the time he was 30, he controlled shipping routes through the Gulf, oil fields spanning 3 countries, and hotels that stretched from Singapore to San Francisco. Omar's personal life, however, was far less stable. He'd been married 3 times, each union ending in whispers of infidelity or simmering resentment. Former wives accused him of using charm to mask manipulation. His last divorce, finalized only 2 years earlier, had cost him millions and embarrassed the al-Rashid family in Dubai's tight-knit social scene. Despite his reputation, Omar was magnetic. He had a storyteller's gift, able to recount desert legends one moment and negotiate multi-million-dollar deals the next. He could make anyone feel like the most important person in the room, a skill that served him in boardrooms and ballrooms alike. To business partners, he was a strategic genius. To staff, he was unpredictable, generous with bonuses one day, icy and exacting the next. Behind closed doors, Omar was known to cultivate connections with powerful figures, journalists, and even minor royals, ensuring that unflattering stories about him rarely reached the press. But not even he could completely suppress rumors. An affair with a married Hollywood actress, clandestine deals with questionable partners, and most dangerously, a long-term relationship with a woman who was said to know too much about his finances. When Omar met Abby Cole in New York, he saw more than a beautiful widow. Her modest upbringing and tragic loss made her an ideal public partner, sympathetic enough to soften his hard image, unconnected enough not to pose a threat to his business dealings. To him, marrying Abby was as much about optics as affection. Still, he found himself drawn to her vulnerability. The way her wide-eyed wonder reminded him of a simpler world outside the gold-gilded halls he inhabited. His family was not so easily charmed. Cousins questioned why a Texas schoolteacher without pedigree or connections should become part of a lineage that had traded silk and pearls for centuries. Omar reassured them. The marriage was his choice, his redemption story. Privately, though, he kept one eye on his fortune, ensuring legal documents shielded his empire. As the wedding date approached, hints of unease slipped through his polished façade. The ex-mistress began calling again, demanding what was owed to her. Anonymous messages arrived on Omar's phone, warnings that he was making a dangerous mistake. At a business dinner in Doha, a trusted advisor joked too casually, "A second household, a new wife. How many secrets can even you keep hidden?" Omar's tight smile faltered for the briefest moment. Still, he pushed forward. The union would be his grand gesture to the world, a chance to recast himself as a family man, a romantic capable of sweeping a grieving woman off her feet. The guest list included royalty, billionaires, and foreign dignitaries. The palace was drenched in orchids imported from Thailand and table settings encrusted with Swarovski crystals. Every detail was calibrated for spectacle. What Omar didn't know was that some of those details, the overlooked side entrance left unguarded, the prenuptial agreement signed under questionable circumstances, the whispered threats dismissed as idle jealousy, would become clues in the investigation that followed the bloodbath. To the press, the Al-Rashid wedding would soon become a case study in hubris and heartbreak. To Omar, in his final hours of unbroken confidence, it was proof that he could control every narrative. In the opulent desert kingdom of Zahara, where skyscrapers gleamed like crystal spires against a cobalt sky, magnate Prince Kareem al-Sarif orchestrated every step of his public life with precision. But behind closed doors, he had begun a calculated courtship with Abigail "Abby" Cole, the widowed teacher from the windswept plains of West Amarillo. Their romance played out like a high-budget drama. Kareem flew Abby to exclusive charity galas in Novara, the European capital of old-world grandeur. Paparazzi caught glimpses of them boarding private jets, her small-town modesty contrasting with his custom-tailored suits. To the outside world, they were an unlikely pair, a Texas widow and a desert prince. To those who knew Kareem's strategic mind, it was a perfect optics move. Abby softened his reputation for ruthless business tactics, while Kareem offered her an escape from grief and obscurity. Abby's first trip to Zahara was dizzying. The royal palace, a sprawling labyrinth of ivory courtyards, whispering fountains, and chandeliers shaped like falling stars, was more breathtaking than any travel forum photo. Kareem personally guided her through the ancient gardens, pointing out rose bushes said to have been grafted from a sultan's 14th century estate. At dinner banquets, she met influential ministers, artists, and tech billionaires. Every handshake and toast reminded her how far she'd traveled from late-night lesson plans and half-empty ranch feed stores. Kareem's presence was magnetic. He leaned in when she spoke, listened with intent, and never once seemed bored by her stories of small-town life. Yet beneath the sparkle, Abby felt tremors of unease. There were fleeting moments, guarded looks between Kareem and his advisors, a tense phone call in a language she couldn't follow, when the air around him chilled. Once, after a state dinner, she overheard two guests murmuring about unfinished business in the Eastern Quarter, their eyes darting toward Kareem's empty chair. She told herself she was imagining things. When Kareem proposed, he chose a dramatic stage, the terrace of his mountain villa overlooking Zahara's glittering skyline. The night air was warm, carrying the faint scent of jasmine. A full orchestra, flown in from Vienna for a private performance, played a soft waltz as Kareem knelt, holding out a diamond that seemed almost to hum with captured starlight. "Abigail," he said, his voice steady but his eyes intense, "the world may see us as opposites, but I see in you the strength and honesty I have always needed. Will you be my wife?" Abby's breath caught. She thought of Marcus, the husband she'd buried, and wondered if this was what moving forward was supposed to feel like. A terrifying leap into a life that seemed too perfect to be real. Tears pooled in her eyes as she nodded. "Yes," she whispered. Cheers erupted from the small group of friends and staff Kareem had assembled. Fireworks streaked the night sky, their colors reflected in the villa's infinity pool. The official palace photographer captured the moment, the prince and the widow locked in an embrace, knowing it would become tomorrow's headline across Zahara's media outlets. That night, as Abby traced the diamond's edge under the soft glow of a bedside lamp, she promised herself she would ignore the whispers, the fleeting doubts. After all, fairy tales weren't perfect either. They were filled with dragons and trials before the happy ending. But in a quiet corner of the palace, one of Kareem's advisors was on the phone with a shadowy contact. His voice was low, urgent. "The engagement changes nothing," he said. "Our problem hasn't gone away." For Abby, the proposal was a dream come true. For Kareem, it was another move in a high-stakes game. And for those watching from the shadows, it was the spark that would ignite something far darker than either of them could imagine. The weeks following the proposal unfurled in a blur of silk fittings, palace protocols, and whispered instructions from Zahara's royal planners. Abby Cole, the Texas widow turned royal fiancée, found herself swept into a world that felt as foreign as it was dazzling. Every morning, she awoke in Kareem al-Sarif's mountain villa to the sound of distant prayer calls and the aroma of cardamom coffee brought by discreet palace staff. The Zaharan press was relentless, splashing her image across glossy covers under headlines like "The Prince's Unexpected Bride" and "From Amarillo to Al-Sarif, a Fairytale Union." Paparazzi followed her to every bridal fitting and etiquette lesson, eager to capture the American schoolteacher transformed into a princess-in-waiting. At first, Abby was intoxicated by the attention. Designers draped her in cascading gowns of embroidered chiffon. Jewelers presented tiaras so heavy she had to practice wearing them while walking the palace's marble corridors. Kareem arranged a private dinner with Zahara's cultural minister, who assured Abby the people admired her strength and humility. Yet in quieter moments, while attendants pinned lace to her hem or photographers adjusted her pose, her doubts began to creep in. The palace itself seemed to hold secrets. Servants exchanged uneasy glances whenever Kareem's brother, Prince Samir, appeared. Conversations hushed when Abby entered unexpected rooms. One evening, she caught a snippet of two staff members whispering, "She doesn't know yet, but when she does," before their words dissolved into silence. Even Kareem seemed different. He was still charming, but his attention was fractured, his phone calls longer and more guarded. Once, as she approached his study unannounced, she overheard him speaking urgently in Zaharan. "No more delays. If the documents leak now, the wedding is useless." When he spotted her in the doorway, he smiled too quickly, changing the subject to honeymoon plans in the Seychelles. Jenna, Abby's best friend from Texas, flew in for the bridal festivities. Over tea on a sunlit balcony, Jenna studied her friend's face. "You don't look happy," she said softly. "Excited, yes, but not happy." Abby hesitated, then laughed it off, blaming pre-wedding stress. Still, that night she lay awake, staring at the gilded ceiling, the diamond engagement ring heavy on her hand. The Zaharan tabloids speculated endlessly about the dowry and palace politics, but Abby's worries were far more personal. She wondered whether she truly knew Kareem, beyond the grand gestures and choreographed public appearances. The fairytale veneer couldn't erase flashes of unease. A strange call at midnight, a shadowy visitor slipping through a side gate, the way Kareem sometimes looked past her, as if calculating outcomes she couldn't begin to guess. As the wedding date drew near, the palace became a construction zone of opulence. Orchids were flown in from 4 continents. A custom glass walkway was installed across the main courtyard fountain so the bride could appear to walk on water. Security checkpoints multiplied, with guards scanning every guest list and delivery truck. In the middle of a final gown fitting, Abby received a message slipped discreetly under the dressing room door. The handwriting was elegant but unfamiliar. "Be careful. Not all vows spoken under Zahara's stars are meant to be kept." She froze, the lace bodice clutched to her chest, her heart hammering. When she stepped into the hallway, no one was there. That evening, Kareem hosted an intimate pre-wedding dinner. The terrace glowed with lantern light, and music from a string quartet floated over the desert breeze. He toasted Abby in front of close friends and advisors, promising a life of loyalty, adventure, and everlasting devotion. His words were perfect, so perfect they almost felt rehearsed. Abby forced a smile as applause rose, the warning note hidden in her clutch burning like a secret flame. Dawn broke over Zahara's horizon in a wash of rose and gold, the desert dunes glowing like molten metal. From the palace balcony, Abby Cole watched the sunrise, her silk robe fluttering in the breeze. Today, she would marry Prince Kareem al-Sarif, the man who had lifted her from quiet Texas widowhood to the threshold of royalty. Yet her stomach twisted with unease. The palace courtyard had been transformed overnight. Rows of white orchids lined a crystal walkway that spanned the fountain, making it appear as though the bride would glide over water. Zaharan and international dignitaries filled the guest lists, their limousines forming a glittering convoy outside the palace gates. Jewel-toned banners flapped along marble arches, and the National Orchestra tuned their instruments for the ceremony that would be broadcast live to millions. As attendants dressed her, Abby felt the weight of the diamond tiara pressing against her temples. The same unknown handwriting had appeared again this morning. Another note slipped into her bridal bouquet. Truth has a way of surfacing, even in paradise. She tucked it into her gown, heart hammering. Kareem, meanwhile, entertained reporters in the palace's sunlit reception hall. Cameras captured his easy laugh, his tailored white sherwani gleaming. "Today we unite not just two people," he declared for the press, "but two worlds." Yet his eyes darted toward Samir, his younger brother, who lingered at the edge of the room, expression unreadable. The ceremony began with an explosion of music, drums echoing through the courtyard, strings swelling. Abby stepped onto the glass walkway, every eye locked on her. The crowd gasped at the illusion of her floating across water, a vision in pearl-white chiffon. Kareem's smile was dazzling, but as she drew closer, she saw tension in his jaw, as if some invisible clock ticked too loudly in his ears. Halfway through the vows, the palace lights flickered. A murmur rippled through the guests, but the music continued. Abby's pulse quickened. She caught Jenna's eye among the bridesmaids. Her friend's face was pale, lips pressed into a thin line. The vows were spoken, the rings exchanged. Cameras flashed. Just as the officiant declared them husband and wife, a loud crash echoed from a nearby corridor, metal against marble. Guards moved discreetly, scanning the crowd. The orchestra stumbled, then recovered, the music resuming with forced brightness. Kareem squeezed Abby's hand a little too tightly. The reception unfolded with regal splendor. Crystal chandeliers glittered over tables laden with saffron lamb, jeweled rice, and honeyed figs. Guests danced under lantern light while photographers captured every moment for the world to see. Yet beneath the celebration ran an undercurrent of tension. Conversations paused whenever an uninvited shadow passed. Jenna pulled Abby aside near the terrace. "Something's off," she whispered. "I saw someone near the service entrance, someone dressed like staff, but wrong." Abby nodded, swallowing hard. She wanted to dismiss it as nerves, but the notes, the crash, Kareem's distracted glances, it all pointed to a truth she wasn't ready to face. As midnight neared, Kareem led her to the private suite prepared for them. The palace halls were quiet now, echoing with distant laughter from lingering guests. The air smelled faintly of incense and roses. He brushed her cheek with his fingers. "Everything will be perfect from now on," he whispered. But his eyes betrayed a flicker of something else, regret or fear. Inside the suite, Abby placed her bouquet on the table, the warning note slipping free. It fluttered to the floor, landing face up under the soft glow of the chandelier. Kareem bent to pick it up. For a heartbeat, their eyes locked. His widened in recognition, her searching for answers. A single gunshot shattered the moment. Glass exploded from the suite's window, the echo rolling through the palace like thunder. Screams erupted in the distance. Kareem yanked Abby to the floor, the tiara clattering away. The fairy tale had cracked, revealing the dangerous game beneath. The palace was chaos. Sirens wailed across Zahara City as security vehicles swarmed the Al-Sarif estate. By the time detectives arrived, the wedding suite had become a war zone of shattered crystal and splintered wood. Abby Cole sat on the edge of the bed in her torn gown. Kareem's arm wrapped protectively around her shoulders. Her hands trembled as she clutched the warning note, now sealed inside an evidence bag. Detective Layla Nassar, a sharp-eyed investigator known for solving Zahara's toughest cases, entered with a tablet in hand. Her reputation was legendary. She had once exposed a corrupt shipping tycoon by decoding a single mislabeled invoice. Tonight, however, even Layla felt the weight of the palace walls pressing in. This wasn't just a crime scene, it was a diplomatic tinderbox. "Tell me everything you saw," she said, voice calm but edged with urgency. Abby replayed the moment, the flicker of light, the shattering glass, the gunshot that could have killed her or Kareem. Kareem added that the shot had come from outside, but palace security reported no intruders. Layla's brow furrowed. Someone knew the layout, knew the timing. She tapped her tablet, pulling up floor plans of the palace. The west terrace lines up perfectly with this window. As guards swept the grounds, they discovered a single glove near the fountain, a plain black glove damp from the misting water. Layla bagged it without comment, but her mind raced. A professional would never leave evidence this obvious. Was the glove a genuine mistake or a message? In the ballroom, guests huddled in small groups, whispering. Jenna paced near the dessert table, her phone clutched tightly. She spotted Abby and rushed over, hugging her fiercely. "I told you something felt wrong," she whispered. Abby didn't disagree. The fairy tale wedding had officially shattered, replaced by a nightmare broadcast across global news channels. Meanwhile, Kareem's younger brother Samir stood alone by a marble column, watching the commotion with an unreadable expression. Layla noticed and approached him. "Where were you when the shot was fired?" she asked. Samir's lips curved into a tight smile. "Dancing with a dignitary's wife. Hundreds of witnesses can confirm it." His tone was smooth, but his eyes flicked briefly toward Abby, an almost imperceptible glance that sent a chill down her spine. Palace security reviewed surveillance footage, but critical cameras on the West Terrace had mysteriously gone dark minutes before the shooting. Layla swore under her breath. Either someone had tampered with the system, or someone inside had granted access. News of the attack spread like wildfire. Zahara's media outlets ran live coverage outside the palace gates, speculating wildly. Was this a political hit? A jealous ex-lover? A rival royal faction? Abby, overwhelmed, stepped onto a private balcony for air. Below, reporters' flashes lit the night like lightning. Her new life, meant to be a second chance, was turning into a global spectacle. The next morning, the palace issued a carefully worded statement. "Last night's unfortunate incident is under investigation. The royal family remains committed to peace and transparency." But inside the palace, whispers grew louder. Some staff claimed to have seen a shadow slipping through a side garden. Others insisted they'd heard a muffled argument between Kareem and Samir earlier in the evening. Layla convened a meeting in a secured chamber. Kareem, Abby, Jenna, and a handful of trusted advisors gathered around a polished teak table. "Until we find who did this," Layla said, "everyone is a suspect." Abby felt the words settle like stones in her chest. She glanced at Kareem, his jaw tight, his hands clenched. For the first time, she wondered if his secrets went deeper than she'd imagined. Outside the chamber, two guards exchanged a quiet conversation in Zaharan dialect, not realizing Jenna was within earshot. She caught only fragments. "Documents offshore, too dangerous." When she asked them to clarify, they stiffened and refused to answer. That night, Abby searched the bridal suite for any clue that might explain the warning notes. In a locked drawer, she found an envelope addressed to Kareem in elegant handwriting. Inside was a photograph, an image of Kareem with an unknown woman, their hands intertwined, standing in front of a private jet. On the back, a message read, "If you won't keep your promises, someone else will make you pay." Abby's breath caught. She slid the photo back into the envelope just as Kareem entered the room. He paused when he saw her expression. "What is it?" he asked, voice tight. Abby forced a smile and shook her head, but doubt gnawed at her. Layla's investigation would soon uncover a tangled web of betrayal, greed, and dangerous alliances stretching far beyond Zahara's borders. But for Abby, the most chilling question was suddenly personal. Was she marrying a hero, or a man whose past could get them both killed? Morning sunlight pierced the palace's tall arched windows, casting fractured rainbows across the polished marble floors. To the outside world, Zahara City was waking to another day of business and bustle, but within the Al-Sarif palace, tension coiled like a viper waiting to strike. Abby Cole, still in yesterday's wrinkled gown, paced the length of her bridal suite. The photo she had discovered, the one of Kareem with another woman, burned in her mind. Detective Layla Nassar convened another closed-door briefing, her sharp eyes scanning everyone assembled. Kareem, his younger brother Samir, Jenna, and two senior palace advisors. She slid a thin folder across the table. "We've confirmed the West Terrace cameras were disabled manually," she said. "Whoever fired that shot knew exactly when and where to strike." Kareem's jaw tightened. "Are you suggesting an inside job?" "I'm saying," Layla replied evenly, "the shooter wasn't a stranger hopping the wall." She tapped a second photo onto the table, this one a grainy still from a nearby traffic cam. A black SUV leaving the palace grounds minutes after the shooting. Its plates were diplomatic and untraceable. Jenna caught Abby's eye, silently urging her to speak up about the photograph she'd found. But Abby hesitated. If she revealed Kareem's secret now, she could trigger a scandal that would engulf them all. Meanwhile, Samir's expression was unreadable as he studied the images. "Zahara has many enemies," he said, his tone smooth. "But you're wasting time looking inward." Layla's attention shifted. "Perhaps," she said, "but enemies often come disguised as friends." Over the next 24 hours, the palace became a fortress. Guards patrolled every corridor. Guests who had lingered after the wedding were quietly escorted out. Zahara's press was locked out of the estate, but rumors leaked. Stories of masked gunmen, of a foreign assassin, even of royal family feuds. Abby finally confided in Jenna that night. In the shadow of the palace balcony, she revealed the photo. Jenna's eyes widened. "Abby, this could be the motive. That woman, who is she?" Abby shook her head. "I don't know, but the note said, 'If you won't keep your promises.' Kareem promised me forever. Who else did he promise?" Down the hall, Kareem stood alone in his study, staring at his phone. A message glowed on the screen. "Last chance. Deliver the documents or next time I won't miss." His hand trembled as he deleted it. The walls that had once been his sanctuary now felt like a trap. The next morning, Layla made a breakthrough. The glove recovered by the fountain contained trace, fibers matching a rare Zaharan military uniform, an older style retired years ago. Few would have access to such clothing. When she confronted palace staff, one older guard went pale. He admitted that years ago, Kareem had been involved in a covert operation to protect the family's offshore assets during a financial scandal, an operation that left more than a few powerful enemies nursing grudges. Abby overheard the revelation from the hallway. The man she'd married wasn't just a charming prince. He was entangled in a world of backroom deals and dangerous secrets. She returned to her suite, heart-pounding, only to find her bouquet, wilting now, sitting on the vanity. Another note had appeared among the fading petals. "He can't protect you. Leave while you still can." Her hands shook as she read it. The fairy tale had officially shattered. That evening, Layla met privately with Abby. "I need you to tell me if Kareem has kept anything from you, enemies, debts, affairs." Abby hesitated but handed over the photo. Layla examined it, her expression tightening. "This could blow everything open, but it also puts you in danger." Outside the palace walls, international headlines blared. "Royal wedding attack. Who wants Prince Kareem dead?" Reporters camped at the gates, hungry for scandal. Social media speculated wildly, some posts accusing Abby herself of orchestrating the drama for fame or fortune. In the privacy of their suite, Abby confronted Kareem. "Who is she, the woman in that photo?" His eyes darkened. "A mistake from my past," he said quietly, "but she's not the threat." "Then who is?" Abby demanded. Kareem didn't answer. Instead, he looked out the window toward the desert where the sun dipped behind the dunes. "The kind of people," he said finally, "who don't leave loose ends." Abby realized then that she was no longer just a bride caught in palace intrigue. She was now a target in a game whose rules she didn't understand. If you're drawn to unraveling every layer of a mystery, subscribe now, because the next twist in Zahara's tangled web will leave even the most seasoned crime enthusiasts stunned. Detective Layla Nassar strode into the palace's west wing at dawn, her badge glinting under the harsh overhead lights. The night had been long, hours of interviews, security sweeps, and whispers traded between frightened staff. But this morning, she carried a fresh lead that could tip the balance of the investigation. Two palace guards flanked her as she entered a small storage room. Inside, on a dusty shelf, she found a hidden compartment containing a compact case, a dismantled rifle scope, gloves matching the fibers found on the glove by the fountain, and a torn invitation to Kareem's wedding. The storage room was assigned to Tariq Rahman, a long-serving security officer with impeccable credentials. Tariq was summoned immediately. He arrived pale and trembling, the once proud bearing of a palace guard now crumbling under scrutiny. "This isn't what it looks like," he stammered, his voice cracking. Layla's tone was cool, measured. "Then tell me what it is, Tariq, because right now it looks like you fired that shot." Tariq swore he'd been framed. He insisted he'd been on the opposite side of the palace when the attack happened, and several staff members remembered seeing him there. Still, the evidence was damning: the hidden cache, the missing security footage, the diplomatic SUV. As Layla escorted Tariq through the palace halls, whispers spread like wildfire. Some staff expressed disbelief. Tariq had been loyal for 2 decades. Others exchanged uneasy glances, as though his arrest confirmed their worst fears, that this was no random act but part of a larger conspiracy. Abby watched the scene unfold from the balcony, her fingers gripping the railing. Jenna joined her, eyes wide. "Do you think he really did it?" she whispered. "I don't know," Abby admitted, "but it feels too easy, like someone wants us to believe it's him." Meanwhile, Kareem maintained a stoic facade for the cameras. Outside the palace gates, Zahara's press swarmed, shouting questions about the arrest. The royal communications team released a brief statement. "A suspect has been detained in connection with the incident. The royal family is cooperating fully with authorities." That evening, Layla interrogated Tariq in a secure room. Under the flicker of a single bulb, she laid out the evidence: the rifle scope, the glove, the invitation fragment. Tariq's hands shook as he spoke. "I swear on my life, detective, I didn't fire that shot. Someone planted those things. They want you to stop looking." "Who?" Layla pressed. Tariq hesitated, glancing toward the observation window. "There are people Kareem crossed years ago, smuggling routes, offshore accounts, dangerous men who don't forget." Layla leaned forward. "Names, Tariq, give me names." Before he could answer, a commotion erupted in the hallway. A guard burst into the room, face ashen. "Detective, Tariq's attorney just collapsed outside, poisoned coffee." The interrogation halted. Medical personnel rushed in, but it was too late. The attorney was dead. Layla's eyes narrowed. "Someone wants our trail to end here," she muttered. News of the poisoning spread rapidly, fueling conspiracy theories. Social media buzzed with hashtags like Zahara Secrets and Palace Cover-Up. International media questioned whether the royal family was shielding deeper corruption. That night, Abby couldn't sleep. Kareem paced their suite, silent, his phone lighting up every few minutes with encrypted messages. When Abby tried to ask what was happening, he brushed her off. "It's safer if you don't know," he said, his voice tight. Jenna, meanwhile, snooped through the palace archives, searching for anything that might explain the smuggling rumors. She discovered old Zaharan news clippings about a collapsed shipping empire linked to Kareem's family, an empire rumored to have hidden fortunes offshore just before its fall. In a private meeting, Layla reported her doubts to her superior. "The evidence against Tariq is too clean, too convenient," she said. "And now his lawyer's dead. Someone inside this palace is orchestrating a cover-up." Outside Zahara, foreign intelligence agencies began sniffing around. offering assistance to the investigation. A polite but pointed signal that international eyes were now fixed on the Al-Sarif family. By the end of the week, Tariq Rahman was officially charged with attempted murder. The royal family publicly thanked authorities for their swift action, but inside the palace, no one felt relief. Even Kareem's stoic mask cracked briefly as he admitted to Layla in a low voice, "If Tariq didn't do it, then the real shooter is still here." Abby watched her new husband from across the room, doubt gnawing at her. She remembered the warning notes, the mysterious photograph, and Kareem's evasive answers. The man she'd trusted with her heart was now at the center of a storm bigger than she had ever imagined. The desert night around Zahara city was unnervingly still, as if the dunes themselves were holding their breath. Inside the palace, Detective Layla Nassar spread a series of photographs across a mahogany table: Tariq's hidden cache, the SUV's blurry license plate, and finally, the candid photo of Kareem with the mysterious woman. Abby stood beside her, arms wrapped around her own waist for comfort. Jenna hovered near the doorway, biting her lip. "Everything circles back to this," Layla said quietly, "but the timeline doesn't fit if Tariq acted alone." Abby studied the images again. The faces, the patterns, the unanswered questions, all of it felt like a puzzle with one missing piece. She glanced toward the window where Kareem stood, his silhouette framed by the city lights. "You're still hiding something," she whispered. Kareem turned slowly, exhaustion etched into every line of his face. "Years ago, my family brokered deals to protect our fortune," he admitted. "Not all of them were legal. The woman in that photo, Soria, was an informant. She warned me we'd made enemies too powerful to confront directly." Layla's brows knitted. Enemies like who? Before Kareem could answer, a sudden bang echoed down the hallway, gunfire. Guards shouted. Jenna gasped. Layla drew her weapon and motioned for everyone to stay behind her. The group crept toward the west corridor, where smoke began to curl beneath the gilded doors of the archives room. Inside, flames licked the shelves. Someone was burning evidence. Through the haze, a shadowy figure fled toward a side exit. Layla gave chase, sprinting across the courtyard. Abby, against her better judgment, followed. The chase led them to the stables, where the fleeing figure stumbled. Layla tackled him to the ground. The hood came off, revealing Samir, Kareem's own brother. His face was twisted with desperation. "Samir," Abby's voice cracked. Samir spat dust. "You think Kareem's the hero? He's no better than the men he betrayed. He left me to take the fall for those offshore deals. When Soria showed up with proof, I knew it would all come crashing down. This wedding was my chance to send a warning." "You tried to kill your brother?" Layla hissed. "I tried to scare him," Samir shot back. "But Soria's people, they wanted blood. The shot wasn't mine. I planted evidence on Tariq to buy time." Kareem appeared then, breathless, his eyes hard. "You were my brother," he said, voice heavy with grief. Samir laughed bitterly. "Brothers don't leave each other for dead." Before Layla could cuff him, a black SUV screeched to a halt at the stable's edge. Masked men spilled out, weapons raised, the true conspirators at last. Chaos erupted. Gunfire shattered lanterns, horses whinnied in terror. Kareem shoved Abby behind a haystack and dove for cover. Layla returned fire, precise and unflinching. Jenna dragged Abby to safety, their gowns catching on splintered wood. In the confusion, Samir was hit, a clean shot to the shoulder. The masked men retreated when palace reinforcements swarmed the grounds. Tires screeched, and the SUV disappeared into the desert night, leaving smoke and silence in its wake. Hours later, under a pale dawn, Layla reported to her superiors. Samir was in custody, Soria had vanished, and the palace's darkest financial secrets were now public knowledge. Zahara's glittering image was tarnished, but the immediate threat was over. In the quiet aftermath, Abby stood on the palace balcony, staring out at the endless dunes. Kareem joined her, his hand brushing hers. "You could leave," he said softly. "No one would blame you." Abby's gaze lingered on the horizon. "I didn't marry you for the fairy tale," she replied. "I married you for the truth, even if it's ugly." Kareem managed a weary smile. Below them, reporters gathered outside the palace gates, their cameras hungry for a glimpse of the newlyweds who had survived bullets, betrayal, and burning lies. Inside, palace staff whispered about reforms, about rebuilding trust, about a royal couple tested by fire. Detective Layla, packing up her case files, allowed herself a small sigh of relief. But she couldn't shake the feeling that Soria was still out there, holding the final card in this deadly game. As the sun rose higher, bathing Zahara in gold, Abby and Kareem faced the city hand in hand, not as perfect royals, but as flawed survivors.